Welcome to February Job Talk webinar. As I said, it's intended to be interactive. You can unmute your phone at any time and ask any questions that you have, or obviously feel free to click on the chat box and interject any items or questions you may have during the webinar. I'm joined today by Jamie Drajka. Jamie's been with Impact for over 10 years. Her specialties in IT, accounting, finance, and operations. So I'm delighted to have her with us today. With that said, we'll start the webinar. Once again, welcome. I do have Jamie. I've got her keyed in on this as well. We're going to spend some time walking through the do's and don'ts of resumes. From our seat, we see hundreds of resumes on a daily basis. The formatting and recommendations that we're going to give to you are from not only the HR folks that we deal with on a daily basis, but also from a line manager folk that we deal with on a daily basis that has kind of shaped this for us. So we're going to spend some time giving you some perspective of what they have shared from what that employer is looking for, what you should and should not include into your resume, and obviously key red flags to avoid. As I said, at the end, I've got 5 resumes that I pulled out that were submitted, and I'll just walk through what I saw in the resume when I received it, and then most importantly, my recommendations thereafter. I'm going to click on my first comment here before we get going. It's doing really slow here today. All right, so somebody said, is anyone talking? I can't hear anything. I should start there. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
So, oh, there we go. All the yeses respond. All right, I'll pick back up. As I said before, those of you that are new, Impact Business Group does focus in our IT, engineering, accounting, finance, specialty search areas. We do touch operations, accounts payable, receivable, customer service as well through accounting, finance. You'll get a complete listing of our services at www.impactbusinessgroup.com. If you have any questions, my contact information is on there. Feel free to call me at any point. Our locations are in Grand Rapids and Tampa, and as I said, please hit us up with any questions that you may have after this presentation. What are employers looking for in a resume? Obviously, the reason that the job is open is either somebody left or it's an expansion. And all employers are looking for the perfect candidate. They're looking for the person with the right number of years of experience that has come out of the industry that they function in. We call it the purple squirrel on the recruiting side. Jamie can attest to this. When clients give us our requirements, our first reaction every time is that candidate doesn't exist. But in the real world, those clients are looking for compensation alignment, industry alignment, role background alignment, and they want a detailed understanding of what you as a potential candidate have specifically accomplished as it pertains to their open role. So what you should or should not include in your resume, make sure your resume includes your accomplishments, functional accomplishments, the technical accomplishments. Dig down on that exact team size that you're on, your specific role, and the outcomes. We call it the STAR methodology internally here, and that's providing insight on that situation that you were involved in, what your specific task was, and specifically what your actions were related to that task, and ultimately the result. What was the outcome? So every time we talk to a candidate and work through a new resume or about how they can further that resume, we employ that STAR methodology so that individual can really think and do a deep dive of what they really have accomplished and what they've done on a day-to-day basis with a particular player. Okay? One of the hot things that we see all the time, and it drives Jamie crazy as well, but when candidates lay out their employment experience and don't list a month or year, categorize it in 2012, I function in a certain capacity. There's 12 months out of the calendar year, and it leaves a lot to interpretation from the person reviewing the resume. Was this a one-month project, or were you only employed for 2 months? We want to make sure you include the month and year of each employment. We want to eliminate those red flags when somebody reading that resume is evaluating whether to bring you in or have a discussion. The other thing is career progression. Make sure you include promotions, title changes during that term of employment. If you were with the same employer for 4 years, make sure that you list every quote-unquote job title that you've functioned. You want to show the reader that there's been detailed progression in your career. Finally, make sure you include the dates on your training, on your certification, and your education. We get this question a ton from our more seasoned community, for which I am, so I'm categorized as a seasoned person in this aspect. But employers don't want to be left to question or guess when somebody may have obtained their high school degree or a certification or completed their college degree. Folks want to leave that off and try and mask what their level of experience may be or their seasoning level, if you will. But you want to make sure you include it on there so there's a complete, accurate picture. If I'm to provide some insight where the market is today versus where it was in the mid-'90s, it's much more difficult for recent grads, whether it be high school or college, to find jobs than it is for seasoned people like myself that are 20-plus years of experience. What I mean by that is every employer we're dealing with is looking for more, not less, whereas in the 90s it was the opposite. They wanted to groom and train more junior-level people or entry-level people. Not the market today. So make sure you leave a complete and detailed understanding of exactly what certifications, training, and education you have. Again, I'll just say this from the back seat for everybody. If you can make sure you mute your phone unless you've got a question. That way we leave all the distortion out. That said, someone just pinged me real quick here. Bear with me. Hearing feedback from someone's phone. Hopefully that ended it. If you can mute it for the benefit of others, I really appreciate it. Red flags to avoid. This is just a couple of them that are common from our standpoint, but it is dependent on the person reading it, and other people, have various degrees of irritation when these things occur. But generally speaking, highlights of what to avoid.
It's definitely number one, spelling errors and grammatical errors need to be fixed on those resumes. I know Matt touched upon the omitting the date, and that just leaves the employer as well as the recruiter guessing. You want to make sure that all that information is in there. Explaining gaps, the resume, even if it's a stay at home for a while, that is very important. And then leaving off any information as far as employment, employers, where you work, the time frame of where you work as well.
Somebody just pinged in a great question on this too, saying, listen, if you're older, I've been to leave off dates in the education section, which conflicts with my comments. My comments aren't absolute. It isn't the rule. what I am trying to express to you in today's marketplace, the pendulum has swung. And again, I group myself in this as a seasoned person with over 20 years of experience. Those employers want to be inclusive with those work experiences as well as those dates of education, which leads, to what Jamie was talking about a little bit. You want to explain those gaps in your resume, even if it's home helping somebody out. One of the resumes I highlighted at the end of the person was in that, was attending to a family situation, but you want to account for that. So that's the question, what was this person doing during this 2-year time frame? It's much easier for the reader of this resume to self-screen you out than screen you in and looks for those gaps or incomplete dates or lack of dates on an education to say, we're going to move on this one. So I appreciate the question on leaving that off, but from the seat we sit in, you never want to leave information off of that resume. Is there any other questions that I can answer along those lines?
What would you do when somebody else says that you have to have like a 1-page or a 2-page note? How does that work?
I'm going to let you repeat that question. A lot of background in your phone line, so if you hit that one more time, I'll try and answer it.
Okay. So when employers prefer that it's a 1 or 2-page resume, say it's 1 page for an intermediate role and 2 pages for a more senior or seasoned professional role, how would you combat that?
All right, I'm gonna flip this back, and I think you asked the difference between 1-page resume or 2-page resume or what an employer is requesting. If an employer is requesting a cover letter or your resume to be to a certain length, then obviously you need to do it. We don't deal with very many customers, if any at all, in my 20 years that have said, I only want a 1-page resume. So you see the seat I'm sitting in and coming from is a recruiter's desk, and we've never heard somebody say keep it to a page. What we will tell is entry-level people or folks with 1 year of experience or less to keep it to a page, but people with greater than 1 year of experience to absolutely represent everything you've done. So to answer your question, if the employer is asking for a certain length, you have to trim out some of the bullets and information in order to meet word count or length that they're requiring.
Okay. Makes sense. Thanks.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
I keep pulling out bullets. We consider fluff, personality. You work well with others. That stuff they can figure out when they are interviewing you. It keeps them be technical skills, what you've accomplished at each position.
I'm going to say it again. If you could please review your benefit of the others, I'd really appreciate it.
I'd like to ask a question, please.
Yes?
Yes, I'm sorry. So I have been a contractor for the past over 15 years, and one thing that I have been seeing is that more and more recruiters are, of Indian descent, no offense or anything, but they don't seem to understand the per diem concept. In fact, they don't want to pay for it, and they just don't know anything about the per diem. How do I deal with something like that?
I'm going to try and take a stab at it because you're saying how do you deal with it and explain your background when the recruiter you're dealing with doesn't understand? I guess I'm missing the question.
So the question is, some recruiters more and more every day do not understand the per diem concept. And when doing during the negotiation, they don't even include it. And when I include it, they right away, they become skeptical about this extra money that they have to provide. And so my question is, how do I deal with the per diem negotiation?
Yeah, I would say that the easiest answer for that is, in today's market, all those negotiations have been pretty well handled from the federal government. And if you go to the GSA per diems and codes, the U.S. federal government has laid out exactly what can be expensed and what the amount is based on the city you're going to. So for me, on the recruiting side, you just want to present either A, an all-inclusive hourly rate, or B, this is what my hourly rate is plus standard GSA expenses. And if you address that up, I think you'll find it a smoother process for you before even getting halfway down the road.
Got it. Thank you.
A couple other questions that are just rolling in on chat I want to hit on real quick is I'm going to paraphrase, is somebody is saying, hey, I've got 20 plus years of experience. How do you want me to represent that? Obviously, you want to represent your current role with the most, right? It should be 8 to 15 significant accomplishments in your current role. And for me, and again, I'm lumping myself into this 20 plus years, my first job, right, as a software developer, I've got one bullet that exists on that. Here's what I did, right? What I did 20 plus years ago versus what I'm doing today. I want to make sure I'm accounting for that chronological experiences. Not necessarily that I want to be a programmer as I was 25 years ago, but what I do want to highlight in that first job is my experiences in software as well as banking, because those two functional areas, albeit 20 years ago, the glass is half empty. Functional experiences may be beneficial to that potential employer I'm applying to. Another question said, how do you handle it when past employers was not interested in measurements that would illustrate your accomplishments? I don't know the best way to answer that other than saying I want to articulate those accomplishments that I had, and most importantly, I want to highlight those ones that are most important to me that will help me secure that potential new position that I'm applying to. So if the new position saying I want somebody with specific accounts payable, accounts receivable experience in manufacturing, I want to make sure I want to highlight that throughout my resume and speak to those situations. Another question that's popped into this as well is somebody trying to make a career move, right, from information security or into that, out of a role that may not be related to IT or information security. My answer to that is on the educational and training side, you want to list all those courses, that training, the reading, the seminar, the clinics, the classes that you've attended and been to that highlight that direction. So you're going to be more reflective in those experiences under the educational summary than you are in your hands-on experience as, manufacturing engineer that may be less applicable to where you want to go. All good questions, which leads to the next slide that you'll see in submitted resumes. Like I said, there's probably 60 resumes that got submitted. I've tried to pick out 5 examples that I thought best represented what we're going to talk about here today. But the format that you see in front of you is, generally speaking, this is the format we want to follow. And it's not a format that I've created or that Jamie has created, but it's feedback from ease of reading, from content, from both line management as well as executive HR management that says this is the way for which the information reads the easiest for us. And what we're trying to do is make it in a really easy, readable format so it appeases both folks non-technical as well as technical, for people non-functional as well as functional. So for us, the format is pretty straightforward in our eyes. Our next heading is professional summary. A lot of people replace or have on their current resumes, instead of a professional summary, they say they're listed as an objective. Here's what the objective is. From the seat we sit in, we prefer professional summary that talks about your skills in summary. We feel that the statement of my objective statement is a proclusive statement, meaning your objective is to get a job. And more often than not, we find the objective statement to be proclusive versus inclusive. In other words, if you apply and put on your objective that you're seeking a senior level IT developer, but the employer has a mid-level spot that they feel like your skills align better to, more often than not, because you've used the word senior in that objective statement, they'll pass over you. And what we want to do is create a professional summary so that potential employer is calling you and asking you the question, I've given you the first right of refusal, would you consider something less? And I'd rather be the driver of my career in that role than let somebody else on the screening side rule me out. Next section, from a formatting standpoint, we put our degree, certifications, technical training that somebody may have. Next bullet is the computer skills, hardware and software. I say the same thing to the person that was asking about the 20-plus years of experience. Don't assume that a technology or an ERP package that you were exposed to that's specific to a specific industry, or, for instance, a bottling industry software package where somebody doesn't want to include that because it's so unique. We challenge that and say the glass is half full. We want you to put on all those ERP technologies, functional and technical, that you've dealt with. Okay? Even though it may be obscure, the person reading it may just look at their resume and say, I can't believe candidate X has experience with this particular computer skill. Next up for us is the experience. And again, as we talked about before, we want this to be a chronological order inclusive of all of your experiences. Okay? Your position that you had 25 years ago should not have any more than one bullet attributed to that. Your experience that you currently exist today, you'll want 5 to 10 bullets on your significant accomplishments. In those experiences, make sure you tell about your employer. Don't assume the reader knows. Most of the time, people will take for granted everybody knows who IBM is. Not everybody, right? We want to make sure we talk about the number of employees. 20,000 people worldwide and functioning in a IT and tax, accounting, finance, consulting arena. We want to give the reader some breadth and depth of how big IBM is. Don't assume the reader knows, which includes company size, department size. We want to talk about the industry that each employer is in. As I referenced earlier, my first job was in the banking industry. You want to make sure you reference that because that functional knowledge or that industry knowledge is as important in today's world as the technical component. Also in your profile, make sure you list your title. What specifically was your role? If you were hired in as a entry-level programmer but sit as a senior-level architect today, make sure you chronologically each advancement and what your role is during those time frames. Finally, community involvement, volunteer work, always nice to have on the resume, showcases your overall well-rounded experiences as a human being. Last but not least is references. We always encourage people to put a reference title saying available upon request. You don't have to submit a 2-page reference sheet at the time of application unless it is specifically instructed to you from a potential employer. Jamie, am I missing anything else from the seat you sit in?
I do just want to touch on the bullet form. I probably should have said this in the red flags, but be specific to each of your jobs, the skills that you had, the accomplishments that you had at that specific job. And one of the red flags that I see a lot are people using the same bullets for different positions. I obviously know that sometimes you might have some of the same responsibilities, but it's pretty rare that you would have the exact same responsibilities at two different positions or two different companies. So be a little creative, I think, on how you word those bullet forms.
Any other questions on format? Okay. So I'm gonna pause my screen here momentarily and just pull up the resume examples that I spoke upon in the beginning. But I do want you to know this recording will be posted on our website, so you can, in case you missed anything during the presentation. As always, questions can be tweeted to us at impact_corp or impact job tips. All right, questions while we're loading these resumes. So as I said, I hopefully have protected the identity of these 5 individuals appropriately. If I didn't, my apologies. And also, I did not pull that out in any rhyme or reason. So don't criticize on this. It was just 5 random people, and I thought it would be good examples to show the before and after effect. So in my first example here, this resume came through, and the before is they left the professional summary up top, kind of qualifying their background. You see and then ultimately jump into the relative experience from store management, restaurant supervision. As you continue to scroll down, they list their role in an IT capacity. As I walk through this, I had some ideas or suggestions for this particular person that highlights our formatting and what we're trying to accomplish. So as I move to the second, I've highlighted now some changes that hopefully will better reflect this person's skills and where they're trying to go to. I added the professional summary heading. I didn't change anything on it, but we want to make sure that we replace what was an objective statement with a professional summary. As you scroll down to the education, whether high school, college, we want to make sure we list the GPA if it's 3.0 or greater. And back to the question somebody sent in on chat, if they're trying to make a quote-unquote career transition, moving from one career into another industry, we want to make sure we list relevant coursework here. We want to make sure we list certification, and we highlight where we want to go instead of where we have been. So hopefully this is another example for the question we just received a little bit ago. As we move down into the relevant experience, what you'll see is my highlights throughout this is saying we want to make sure we give an overview of the company, try to show the size of the group, their budgeting responsibility, how many people they're responsible to manage. I apologize for the typos in this as well, but we want to give the reader a sense of that person's not only functional but technical expertise as well as overall leadership ability. And you'll see that throughout, right? As I highlighted down below, this particular person needs to do the same thing here as they talk about their restaurant background. Give an understanding of exactly what they have done. Okay? For this particular person, the other part I mentioned in here and highlighted is on the right-hand side where it says January of 16. What has this person been doing since January of 2016? If it's family-related, if it's back to the school, whatever it might be, we want to make sure we highlight that So the reader of this resume doesn't sit there and draw assumptions that this person's not been working for 3 years now. So let's flip to the next resume. Again, this person jumped right into the professional experience. They did a nice job of bulleting those specific accomplishments that they were involved with in each one of those particular roles. They gave the month and the year that they were employed, which is all excellent. The bullets are concise and clean. But as I go, and as you'll see from this modified, I added some additional to this particular person, right? As I said all along, give that reader a sense of the company, the industry, the size of your team with the overall delivered, right? In the area of employment, they highlighted their progression from a sales coordinator to assistant to the regional vice president. Make sure you give the month and year in each one of those particular roles so the reader can have an understanding. How long did they sit in that sales coordinator role before promotion took place? Look at that as we've got a person with a defined progression within their current employer or their past employer that shows promotability and the ability to take on additional responsibilities. Okay? Again, can't highlight enough. Give that reader a sense of the company, the industry, the size of your team. Exhibit those functional and technical skills so the reader knows exactly where you're coming from. Get two more examples here, if I may. Somebody on the human resources side of the equation. And I use this person as an example, not to offend them, but I use this as an example of saying we have a pretty experienced individual that has taken all of their bullets and all of their information and tried to compress it into 2 pages. So my challenge for them is to expand that resume. You can see on the size of the font and the content and how everything is kind of crammed in here together, they're doing themselves a disservice versus a service. When you have experience, that resume should be 3 pages. It should be 4 pages long. There's nothing wrong with that. From a content standpoint, with the professional summary, jumped into their professional experience and talked about their progression from a contract or temporary role into being hired in permanently. The bullets are laid out, albeit pretty extensive as far as the number of bullets. Formatting could add a little bit more to the eye as far as how they display their information, but this individual has done a very nice job of at least talking through what they have accomplished. My on this, just like everybody else, I would encourage you to talk about the industry, company size, roles and responsibilities. Let's pull up my app. This one, bear with me. And you can see on this, what I've highlighted was, again, the professional summary and what I just covered before. You know, the content is excellent. Expand the font, spread this out a little bit, make it easier to read. You can understand even this resume is 100 a day. And the easier we make it for them to read, the better chances you are to get advanced to the yes pile. So what I've done is just expanded the font, added some more spacing in here, and as I said before in this conversation, is make sure you talk about the company, the industry, the size. They've tried to show their progression in their opening statement down here, which is positive, but I want you to break out each one of those skills. Okay? What I've done also is just added a space between every second bullet, and it makes it a little easier on the eye to read. You need a space between every bullet. It's kind of a personal preference, but by just inserting makes it easier on the reader to go through these. It reads as a bulleted resume versus a book. The question that just came through is, if and when the resume reaches past 2 pages, is it a big deal if it doesn't fit the 3rd page? The answer is no. If you go 2.5 pages, it's completely acceptable. If you go 2 pages, 2 lines on the 3rd page, no. I would challenge you and say we can find 2 lines worth of space to fit those experiences on the first 2 pages. But if the resume goes 2.5 pages, completely acceptable. Most people are opening these resumes in a electronic fashion, so it will end at that point, whether it be at page 3, page 2.5, page 2 3/4. So it's okay. Along those lines, I'm going to highlight my next resume for you, is the formatting of it. It's great to have boxes and drop downs and things of this nature. But understand, in today's world, the applicant tracking systems for most employers, the bulleting and formatting is just disheveled by the time they open them up, either on an iPad or a phone or a laptop. And because the formatting will work very well on a Mac, when somebody goes to open it up similarly on a regular PC, it can look, and I'll highlight this to you, as a disheveled mess. So less formatting is better. What I mean by that is the pictures, boxes, the nice borders on each side of the resume. Electronically, it doesn't always work depending on who's opening that. Another question that just pulled through is, in my resume, I've included a Dean's List graduate under the education section opposed to the GPA. Should I add the GPA and leave both? For me, we have a handful of clients in my 20-plus years of experience that want to see the GPA. GPA is 3.0 or greater. You definitely want to put it on there because they'll ask at some point. If your GPA is 3.0 or less, or 2.9 or less, don't include it. Okay? Back to your Dean List graduate, I put it on accomplishments. If you're on the Dean's List, 4 out of your 12 quarters of college, include it. If you haven't, obviously, or even if it's 1 quarter, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, Dean's List at that particular university. Is it inclusive of saying I've been out 12 quarters? No, but the fact that you made Dean's List, I would put it on. Last but not least on this, if and when the resume reaches past 2 pages, I already covered that one, I apologize. So good questions. This is the last example I wanted to show you from a resume standpoint. Was back to the formatting side. This particular individual jumped right into education, we're a fan of, and then into professional experience. They've listed themselves as self-employed and various clients, and taken those various clients and provided some bullets as an assistant controller of what they've accomplished. Okay, they've grouped it all under 2018 to present, and then you'll see their temporary part-time consulting role also listed as 2018. As we scroll further down this resume, they've continued with, again, years and dates that are not month included, just years included. In contrast, what I wanted to show for this particular individual is this, and it's back to our formatting. Left the education, where it was at, the professional experience. This is my perfect example, or this particular resume is what I was trying to explain earlier. Each project you've been involved with should be represented here, meaning the company name, as long as it's not proprietary and confidential. So if it's Steelcase, for example, you can still highlight company size and industry by eliminating the word Steelcase. You can portray that as X billion-dollar manufacturer of office furniture employs 500. It's not directly saying Steelcase, but it is saying the industry and the size, so it gives the reader some breadth of that project that you were on. So you want to make sure you talk about the company name or the industry, because not only is it a functional environment, but we want that technical environment somebody brings to the table. Okay? So as an example on this particular person, being self-employed on various clients from 2018 to present, we want to list each company with respect to their month and year that the project took place. In this example, I said company ABC was the assistant controller. Talk about it. Report to the county manager for this $5 million office furniture manufacturing, employs 120 people. Gives you some industry, gives you some depth, gives you the reader some understanding of how big that company is you came out of. And then list those appropriate bullets or accomplishments thereafter. Those are just some of the examples. As I said earlier, what we would to do on our is that come in, we get the team and expect a phone call back from somebody within Impact Business Group to answer any questions that you may have one-on-one as it pertains to your resume or how we might be able to help you. With that said, are there other questions that we try and answer for you? Excellent. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. As I said, you have all of our information to download this recording. Don't hesitate to tweet, email, questions that you may have. I appreciate everyone's time and wish you well in your job search. Thank you.